Hello, I'm Sarah Trover, and this is my presentation, my inquiry project on the summer slide, and about how this affects children throughout the year, and how libraries can help prevent it. To assess my background knowledge for this project, I had a fair amount. I've been the program and event manager at the Vigo County Public Library for the last 3 years, but I've also been in charge of summer reading at the Vigo County Public Library in Terre Haute for about 4 years. Before that, I worked at the Clinton Public Library in the Children's Department for 5 years, so cumulatively, over 10 years of experience. But I still feel like the point of summer reading, the summer slide and the prevention of it, it's really a major focus, and I wanted to really tackle that and be able to share why summer reading is so important with others, whether that's parents or others inside my own library, so employees. I also am a parent. I have a 1.5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I know the value of reading to my children and encouraging their love of reading, but I want to be able to share that with others, so this project was something very close to my heart. I use the Alberta Inquiry Method for this project, which is planning, retrieving, processing, creating, sharing, evaluating, and always reflecting on the process. So doing this project, I really went through all of these different components kind of interchangeably. There definitely wasn't a point where it was a linear process, which is what I really liked about the Alberta Inquiry Method. I really worked with other peers, both inside the class and out in my own library to do this project. To begin this project, I had to work on evaluating what is the summer slide and what all it constitutes. And so everything I needed to know, I really started with the United Way of Brevard. They described it really easily as the tendency for students, especially those from low-income families, to lose some of the achievement gains they made during the previous year. I like the simple language of that, and also the idea that it's not something that is just affecting the summer, but that it is cumulative and that it also affects low-income families the most. So what kind of happens at the beginning of summer and at the end, and where that discrepancy is. Primary focus of this project was how the summer reading program that a public library does, how it prevents the summer slide, and what the summer slide really is. And that it's the 2 months during the summer where kids slide behind their classmates, and how non-readers run the risk of falling further behind throughout the year. And how each year students can fall further behind until it's nearly impossible for them to keep up. So it's something that happens during the 2 months of the summer, but is something that is long lasting. So not only throughout the school year, but into other school years as well, and how the gap just widens and widens. So as I stated in the previous slide, it is something that really adds up. So you can see in this great graphic that I found from First Book, it really talks about how it's not just something that happens during the summer, but it's cumulative. Every year that you're not reading and not getting those literacy skills, you fall further and further behind. And so as this states, by the end of 5th grade, kids in need are nearly 3 grades behind their peers in reading skills. So this is something that we really need to bolster to create changes for the lifelong learning of these children. Low income and poverty are uniquely tied to the situation of the summer slide because this is something that affects those communities more than others. The National Summer Learning Association states that when the school year ends, children in high poverty environments struggle not only with basic needs like healthy food and safe places to spend their days, but with losing precious time during the summer months to continue their learning. The cumulative effects is a crisis in the making. By the 5th grade, summer learning loss can leave low-income students 2.5 to 3 years behind their peers. The Summer Learning Association was a wonderful resource for me in that it wasn't just focused on reading and wasn't just a library resource. It focused on how low income is tied to the foods they were eating, how children spend their summers. So for instance, in a lot of low-income families, older children watch the younger children, which means that they're a caregiver during the day. That means they're not focusing on their own learning. They're going through the basic needs of their family members. And so how this really does affect their learning, especially when you consider what other children are doing that are in different income situations, different brackets. The National Summer Learning Association also focused on the achievement gap and how that's not just in regard to reading. Focusing on the summer slide and our gap in reading and by, multiple grade levels is incredibly important, but this also affects math skills and also just focusing on that achievement gap that affects everything based off of a child's income, which is something they have no control over. So the achievement gap between children from high and low income families is roughly 30 to 40% larger among children born in 2001 than among those born 25 years earlier. So the idea is this is something that we're really just starting to understand, how the things that are happening in early childhood and the differences in our high and low income populations are just becoming more and more drastic. And so we're going to see, most likely over the next few years, the summer slide and this achievement gap is something we're going to be focusing on in so many different realms, and libraries need to be at the forefront of that. We need to make sure we're combating that headlong. So on this slide, we're talking about income and how it affects the summer slide with this really lovely graph from First Book. What I like about this visual representation is how just access to books can make all the difference. So it's the idea of just being able to have access to books can change your life. So the idea of students from low-income households with no access to books, they're falling so far behind, and that's where libraries can really shine. We can really help bridge that gap, because this creates a cumulative difference for the whole school year and from year to year. So the idea that just access to books can really remedy the summer slide. This is without any other enrichment activities. This is just the idea of books. So this is showing reading test scores that children are given access to books over the summer perform 35 to 40% better on reading achievement tests than those without access to books. So this is simply with access to books. That means not even participating in a summer reading program, just being near books, whether in a home library or at a public library. So libraries really do play a very critical role in the success of children, because the access to and demand for summer programs is huge. We're realizing where kids from high, having access to a fluid income, or even middle class, they're able to attend summer camps, they're able to go on vacations, having access to things that those in the lower income populations just cannot. So this shows us, this is again from the National Summer Learning Association, 51% of families not participating in a summer program say they would if one was available to them. So that's the idea of what we do during the summer as public libraries, that they would participate if they knew about it or if they had access. And if families who pay for summer programs, the average weekly reported cost is $288 per child per week. So the idea of something that is free and available to everyone is in very high demand. As a public librarian, I am always a big proponent of using your public library and having free access to books, because it does make all the difference. But at the same time, building home libraries is important. Just having print material available to you can change your life. So the idea of building a home library is something that's also incredibly important to me. This is something that we do in my library summer reading program, especially after doing more research on the summer slide, is being able to actually give children that complete their summer reading program, their log, a free book that they have earned. So the idea of earning something for reading, it's incredibly important, and also that builds a home library so they can have access to that all year, anytime they like. I would like to talk again about the achievement gap and how it doesn't just affect your access to books, but also the enrichment activities. So income really does change what you're able to do during the summer. So in middle class families or above, it's very normal for them to travel, visit museums, have enriching life experiences that those in low income surroundings just do not get, and so they miss out on these educational experiences. This is another way that public libraries can really amp up their services by providing enriching educational programming during the summer that's also fun, so that we really help kids get those experiences that they're missing out otherwise. The last focus I really had for this project was, does what you read make a difference? Kids are very used to getting a reading list, reading what's assigned by a teacher, and summer, and as public librarians, this is our time to really get them to read for fun. So the idea that it's not just a list that we're handing them, but that they get to choose their own materials, and how that actually creates lifelong learners. So the idea of how this affects our summer and just lifelong learning is huge. So getting students to read during the summer months can be a challenge. Our aim should not be to force them to read. It should be to develop their motivation to read. Voracious readers are almost always the highest performing achievers in school. Reading, like any other hobby, must be a year-round activity for optimal academic development and eventual career success. Evan Ortlieb also provided 10 tips for reducing the summer reading slide. And these are wonderful tips for librarians. So what they are is connected to letting children choose their own material and letting them choose different kinds of material. So whether that's comic books, blogs, or even drama, the idea that's going beyond just lists, even though they do have a lovely ILA list available, but really considering a child's interest. This helps us do, reading advisory so we can really help them find the right materials. And also, I love the focus of getting children to read above their reading level, not just at it. So sometimes the idea of challenging is also important. This is not a time to slack off if that's not what's going to engage a child. If they're not interested in the material, they're not going to want to read, even if it's easy for them to do. This is another graphic on understanding kids reading what they like and knowing how to enjoy it. So the idea of when kids are allowed to read what they want, they have a better chance of enjoying what they read. This seems simple, but it's often a facet of creating lifelong learners that is overlooked. Sometimes you find some really helpful parents that want to really stretch their children's reading and deter them from reading things like audiobooks or graphic novels, some things that we know as librarians are just as important, but maybe parents don't understand the idea of getting a child to read what they want to read. That's the most important part. So this is where we can also really help guide parents. So help parents understand this is just as important as how much they are reading, is what they're reading, and it's if they enjoy it. Lastly, I'd like to finish this just as what our adult role is, whether you're a librarian or a parent, a teacher, a caregiver, and what we can do to really help raise lifelong learners and to beat the summer slide is to be an adult role model. When kids see us read, they want to read. They want to follow what their teachers and school librarians are doing, what their parents are doing. So what you can do with the information you've learned about the summer slide is become a reader. Help let kids see you read, and as a librarian, help kids find what they want to read. This is how we can bridge the achievement gap, and we can change the outlook of our students and make them more successful in the future. Thank you.